This is the Music Business Conversations podcast, and I'm your host, John Mathis Jr. I'm a Dove Award-nominated songwriter and music publisher with over 20 years of experience working in the music business, including managing independent record labels and working with independent artists. We're going to talk about one of the top 5 most asked questions that I hear. Maybe it's the top 2 or 3. I was asked questions about this topic 2 or 3 times in the past few weeks, and here we go. We're going to talk about it. That topic is distribution. And I understand why there's a high interest in knowing more about this subject. There's a bit of a perception that this is somehow one of the big missing secrets to blowing up and having success or being discovered. But for most, the majority of independent artists, it is just another tool that you can possibly use, just like social media, to try and add a few new followers or fans or listeners. Except this one has some additional requirements and considerations, which include having good quality songs and good quality production, recording. And even with those 2 things covered, it is difficult to move the needle. Let me add here, for background purposes, I've been a part of thousands of digital releases. Some were part of sizable catalogs, and a lot were independent artist releases or other niche releases like children's recordings, instrumental recordings, or themed products. Just across the board, a variety of digital products and thousands of them. I've seen what can happen in regard to some success, but I've also seen a whole lot of what doesn't happen other than the slow drip of streams on many of those releases now that they are out there. By all means, distribution is not a measure of whether those things were good or bad or had merit or not or showcased any talent or not. So don't be discouraged by lack of streams or discovery. It is a tough landscape to compete in. And again, the first foundation is you need good production for the recordings and good songs, both those things. And sometimes distribution is more of a vanity action than a plan for building a following or base of listeners. It's similar to the songwriter who works to get one song signed by a publisher so they can say, I am a published songwriter. But they don't really write any more songs or pursue songwriting seriously. And I've consulted with artists who simply say, I just want to get my music out there, without a plan of action or long-term goal for releasing music. And if you know me, one of the foundations I try to give in regard to anything I talk about is the reasons, the logic, or correct perspective in taking an action or making a choice in regard to pursuing something like distribution. What I'm saying is distribution isn't a one-time act on your behalf where you cross your fingers and say your prayers that the music is out there. It's a long-term commitment. I view distribution as I do anything else. It's a building process, building a catalog of distributed music, just like you'd build content on social media. I want this particular podcast to be more than how to distribute your music. I want to cover the reasons why, or possibly the reasons to wait until you have good recordings, good songs, and a long-term vision and plan should you choose to release music. I want to share what it is and what it isn't. I've worked in the music business long enough to have shipped out physical boxes full of CDs of products to thousands of Christian bookstores over 20 years ago, and to retail outlets like Hobby Lobby, and to have a few physical products land in places like Cracker Barrel stores over a decade ago. And for the past decade, I have seen the complete transition to all digital releases and have been a part of having some songs land on coveted Spotify playlists. I've also worked with some independent artists where the releases have taken their monthly listeners on their Spotify from less than 1,000 to having thousands of monthly listeners. And none of that was an easy task, I promise you. While the method of distribution has changed from physical to digital, the drivers and goals are still relatively the same. If you want to have any measure of success, you have to create a demand for the product. In the days of physical distribution, you had to create a market or demand for the product ahead of time before the release. It didn't just happen automatically. You had to promote yourself, or the label did, the awareness of you as an artist through radio, print media, or other outlets. So when someone saw your CD on the shelf, it might entice them to buy it. A consumer wasn't going to walk down the aisle of a store and see some random CD of an unknown artist and pick it up and buy it. And a distribution company wasn't going to ship CDs of an unknown artist to retail stores to put on their shelves in the first place. Now, in the digital world, everyone has access to placing their music on digital shelves of Spotify, Apple, and hundreds of other platforms without a distribution deal or a record deal. Every independent artist can release music now, but there's a lot more competition for consumers. In fact, rather than competition, it's more like letting consumers know that the product even exists in the first place. So more than ever, you need promotion and marketing activity to direct listeners to your product. You still have to drive consumers and make them aware it is available. And to be honest, your main goal is always building your brand and brand awareness on all platforms, not just digital service providers like Spotify or Apple Music. To be even more honest, you will find as many or more people will consume your content on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and other social media platforms more than on digital service providers like Spotify. They will spend more time consuming what you do on social media platforms than they spend on pure audio platforms. We are in a digital age that leans heavily on video like this. Audio has become secondary in many ways. And the truth is, we've all seen independent artists be discovered and gain more popularity and followers on social media platforms than on streaming platforms. I would say that if you gave it some thought yourself, that is probably where you make most of your new music discoveries: YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and other social media platforms. But streaming platforms are an additional way, once those discoveries happen, to hopefully capture a few more drips of revenue on the digital streaming service side. And one note here, I do have a friend, distributed artist, who's a songwriter and singer who wound up having over 200,000 subscribers on a monetized YouTube channel and was making more money from a monetized YouTube channel than from distributed music. So there are opportunities to find revenue beyond just digital distribution. So make certain you have been building your social media platforms or visual platforms, because those are needed to bring awareness to consumers of your digital audio releases on streaming platforms. And they can realistically do more to further your success as an artist, songwriter, musician than digital distribution. Okay, let's look at a few challenges before you go upload your music to an independent distributor. There are some estimates in the past 2 or 3 years that 40,000 to 60,000 songs are uploaded each day to Spotify. That is a lot of music. That's why I say it's like social media. So much content. Other estimates say that over 100,000 new songs are available each day if you include all the audio platforms like SoundCloud and others. And that is a lot of music in one day. That is a lot of songs just laying there waiting to be discovered, and it's impossible to stumble across that many new songs in one day. There isn't enough time in one day to do that. These facts paint a better picture that distribution is just a piece of what you do, sometimes a small piece, and why diligent marketing and promotional plans for your music are needed. In fact, if you don't promote what you release to streaming platforms, it is sitting among so many new releases that could possibly only get a few more listens than it did when it was stored on your computer. And a reminder, the majority of independent artists have more gains from social media platforms and what they do there than with digital distribution. And this information is not a negative. I'm sharing this so you can assess if distribution is something you are ready to invest time, energy, and money into. And speaking of money, another consideration is your return on investment. Less than 3% of artists make 90% of the revenue paid out by Spotify. Spotify pays about 0.0003 cents per stream. That means every 10,000 streams you might make $30. And Spotify does not pay out for streams less than 1,000 during a year. And it's tough for most independent artists to get 10,000 streams in a year, much less 1,000. Which means you could need 10 to 30,000 streams a year to break even on the annual fee to keep the music up on the platforms and available. Yes, if you don't pay the annual fee to your independent distributor each year, they will issue a takedown of the music. I feel like a dream killer when I give this some of this information, but being in the music business is not only having some talent, but knowledge and experience, and those three things are a podcast for another time. These numbers I'm sharing with you are important because unlike having social media profiles and accounts, which are free for the most part, there is a cost to distributing your music independently. Now, the good news is many distributors have moved to a one-price annual fee for unlimited distribution of music, at least at the time of this video. So this may not be as big of a factor in the past, but right now it can cost you $23 to $50 a year to keep your music available on digital platforms, and you will want to have a 3 to 5 year commitment to releasing music. The biggest factor on your cost is the production cost of recording and the cost of producing quality record. You can share live performances through social media where production value is acceptable for what the environment is. Live on a stage with a band or sitting on a tailgate of a truck sharing a song you wrote, that kind of raw, candid content is acceptable on social media. And in fact, I think viewers almost prefer it over polished looks. But when you're planning on distributing music, now you're talking about going into a recording studio or having some type of recording budget and process to produce studio quality recordings for distribution. And you're entering a world that is very competitive in regard to recording quality. Okay, now that we have some of those analytics and financial numbers out of the way, how do you choose a distributor? I would say for independent artists, it's a balance between that annual cost and what features you may get with the service. But to be honest, they are all very competitive now. They release to the same digital stores and have many of the same features and services. But remember, you have to renew your fee each year to keep those songs on the digital providers, platforms like Spotify, Apple, and 100 others. So if you plan on releasing music for the next 3 to 5 years, that will add up. So factor in that math. Most distributors release the music to the libraries of Instagram, TikTok, and other social media music libraries, but that is something you may want to double check on. That is important if you're pushing users to those platforms to utilize your music in their videos, which is one of the rare byproducts of having songs on those platforms. They sometimes fit a vibe that causes people to want to add the music as a background or soundtrack to their videos. In the past, CD Baby and TuneCore were the kings. But now there are so many others. DistroKid is one that has risen in popularity in the past few years. And one other factor to consider if you're a singer-songwriter is a platform that offers services to the publisher or copyright owner. Some will admin the additional collection of royalties on copyrights for you, and sometimes this is an additional fee for that as well. One note on that additional features point. Several years ago, I used a distributor briefly called SongTrader. At the time, I'm not even certain if they still do this, but if you owned your master recording and you owned your publishing or copyright, you could also make the release available in their sync library. That's where they offer songs to music supervisors looking for music for a documentary, indie film, or TV show, and I did get a small sync licensing placement through that. So this is an additional factor when you're reviewing what an independent distributor offers, especially if you are a singer, songwriter, who owns your master recordings and 100% control on your copyrights. By the way, I'm leaving the research in your hands to find a distributor that you feel is right for you. There are hundreds available. I do not necessarily endorse one over the other, as they do have changes in the plans and policies over the years, and sometimes another bigger company will buy them out. Whoever I recommend today could be a service I wouldn't recommend in a year or two. And a little tip, what may work for you today may shift away from that in 3 to 5 years. It happens. This is the music business. I've moved music catalogs a few times in my career from one distributor to another. Once you've done your research and have selected a distributor, here is what you will need to release your music. First, at this time, most require your audio file to be a WAV file at 44.1 16-bit sample rate. The digital art, 3000 by 3000 JPEG at 300 DPI. You will need your metadata information. Metadata is all the information associated with the song. Some of it will be visible on the release, and some of it is unseen to the consumer. It's the back-end information that the distributor needs to provide to streaming platforms so they'll know how to categorize the music, how to place it in their algorithms, and a host of other things. You need the correct title and artist information. If you are not the songwriter and music publisher and or copyright owner, you will need the songwriter and publisher information. This has become a requirement in order to release your music. This is due to the Modernization Act that helps streaming services know what publishers and what songwriters to pay out to. If you're releasing a cover song, some distributors may require you to obtain a digital mechanical license for the song or show proof you have obtained one, and many offer to license it for you through a service at a cost, of course. If you are the songwriter and publisher, make certain you have registered your songs or song with the proper performance rights organization, or PRO, like BMI, ASCAP, or CSAC. And if you are an artist, be sure and claim your Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and Pandora artist profiles, especially Spotify. This will allow you to see stats on Spotify, in particular, update your images, headshots, bio, avatars, and even add a short 8-second clip to your release. Plus, you can make a playlist pitch through your Spotify artist account. You will want to set a release date out at least 6 weeks. This allows curators time to review your pitch ahead of the release date. Some of the independent distributors will also provide a pre-release link or pre-save link. This can be helpful to you if you have a good social media following. You can try to drive your followers to pre-save the release before the release date. Once they click this pre-save link, it will open to a page and allow them to select their preferred digital service provider and be reminded of the release when it's available on release day. There are some potential impacts of good pre-save numbers. If digital service providers see a lot of pre-save activity, this can influence playlist placement or their algorithms. And it can also influence those two areas during the first week of the release. If you have a large number of followers who have pre-saved and then they're reminded on release day that it's now available, that you'll start that first week out with noticeable streams for the first week by saving all those gathering all those pre-saves. If you have some good social media following and you are working on pre-saves, it could be a good idea to register your release with Luminate, formerly Nielsen. Luminate tracks music consumption. They collect data on sales, streams, downloads, airplay, and audience impressions from major streaming providers, radio stations, and retail providers. And this data is used to create the Billboard charts. So if you've ever wondered how Billboard charts are determined or factored, Luminate is part of that process each week. And obviously, you will want to have some strategies for your releases, music videos or lyric videos or visualizers, shorts, reels, whatever creative ways you can think of in video form on your social media platforms to bring awareness to the music. Streaming for me, in regard to independent artists, is basically an extension of your social media. Hopefully, you have something break out, get a few 100,000 streams or more. But aside from that, it is better treated or viewed as social media. What does that mean? It means being diligent and active often, being committed for a long period of time. If possible, release something every few months. This has become a strategy with a lot of independent artists, releasing a song every 2 to 3 months. With digital distribution, it is always there. Unlike CDs on a shelf that are pulled out a few months after the release is over, you're building a digital catalog, and you can always drive listeners to your releases, whether they're 2 months old or 2 years old. So make the music timeless, stick with your musical identity. I know this may be a lot of information, but hopefully if you're wanting to distribute your music or have a few releases already out there, this will spark some ideas or give you a better vision on how to treat your strategies and approach to releasing your music. Now, my final comment with all of this in consideration: if you are an independent artist that has risen to a certain level of visibility and you're performing dates and booking dates and have built a good professional image and brand, having your music on Spotify and all the platforms does bring a certain level of professional credibility or validity. And no matter where you are at, if you do it well and commit to it for a long time and make it look and sound good. Leave your questions or comments in the comment section. And as always, if you want to support this type of content, there are links in the description for that. And if you've made it this far, thank you for watching. Be sure and like and subscribe or share with an independent artist, songwriter, or musician friend that you know. I will see you next time on the Music Business Conversations podcast.